I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, heads of missions here present, His Excellency Olusegun Obasanjo, His Excellency Ernest Bai Koroma, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, His Excellency Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, and all the eminent observers here present. I now proceed to present the preliminary findings on behalf of the African Union Election Observation Mission. At the invitation of the government of the Republic of the Gambia and the Independent Electoral Commission, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, deployed the African Union Election Observation Mission to the country's presidential election that was held on the 4th of December 2021. The mission was charged with the responsibility of observing, assessing, and reporting on the preparations for the election in line with the relevant AU instruments for democratic elections. The main objective of the mission was to conduct an impartial, independent, and objective assessment of the 2021 election in line with the AU and international principles for democratic elections and the national legal framework governing elections in the Gambia. The AU Election Observation Mission was led by myself as former President of the Republic of South Africa and comprised 9 long-term observers and 60 short-term observers. The observers were drawn from African ambassadors accredited to the African Union, election management bodies, independent electoral and governance experts, and civil society organizations from 30 African countries. It was supported by the technical team from the AU Commission and the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. To achieve its objectives, the AU Electoral Observation Mission undertook the following activities. Prior to the deployment of observers, the AU deployed a pre-election and needs assessment mission from the 12th to 17th September 2021 to assess the context within which the 4 December 2021 election will take place. The assessment mission recommended the deployment of long and short-term observers in the Gambia and provided financial and technical assistance to the IEC. Based on the assessment report, the AU deployed a long-term mission on 20th October 2021. The LOTs were joined by short-term observers on the 22nd of November 2021. Prior to the deployment, both the long and short-term observer undertook 3 days of briefing and orientation on the use of technology in election observation and election observation methodology. They were briefed by Gambian electoral stakeholders on the political and security environment, the legal framework for the election dispute resolution mechanisms, state of preparedness of the Independent Electoral Commission, role of civil society, women and youth groups' participation in the elections. This preliminary statement reflects the AU Election Observation Mission's assessment of the 2021 presidential election up to the close of polling on the 4th December 2021 and the immediate post-election period. A final and comprehensive report will be released within a month from the official announcement of final election results. Preliminary findings under general political context. The presidential election held on 4 December 2021 is at once the Gambia's 6th election since the return to democratic rule after the 1994 military coup, and the first since the defeat of the former President Yahya Jammeh in 2016. The election took place against a backdrop of double failure at crafting a new constitution and at passing a new electoral law. The election also took place within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, it did not affect the timelines and preparations for the elections. Under legal framework, a comprehensive legal and constitutional framework without ambiguities is essential to the administration and democratic elections and ensuring that a country upholds its domestic, regional, continental, and international obligations. The legal framework for the conduct of elections in the Gambia includes Chapter 5 of the 1997 Constitution and Electoral Act, previously Decree 78 of 1996, the Elections Act of 2001, Elections Amendment Act of 2015, and Elections Amendment Act of 2017 to regulate political parties, registration, and major electoral activities. The African Union Election Observation Mission notes that the legal framework for the 2021 election is generally in line with international and regional norms and standards for the conduct of democratic elections, as it protects fundamental freedoms of association, assembly, and political participation. The Constitution also recognizes and guarantees fundamental human rights and freedoms, including freedom of speech, conscience, assembly, association and movement, and political rights. It further provides principles for which, how, and when elections are conducted, universal adult suffrage, and the establishment of an independent electoral body. However, some of the gaps in the legal framework include the absence of a constitutional provision for presidential term limits, absence of procedures for announcing final results of a presidential election, and absence of affirmative action to promote women's and youth's political participation and inclusion. The electoral system in the Gambia is based on the first past the post or simple majority system. In line with Article 63 of the Constitution of 1997, a president serves a term, a 5-year term, once elected. However, the AU Election Observation Mission notes that the current Constitution has no presidential term limit. The homegrown voting system, using drums, tokens, sand, and sieves, has been in use since 1960. Although the voting system is simple, effective, and efficient, some stakeholders that the AU Election Observation Mission consulted have proposed replacing it with paper ballots. The reasons given for the proposals to replace the voting system with paper ballots are projected costs and logistic factors when the number of candidates increases. The AU Election Observation Mission noted the proposals under the Elections Bill to change the electoral and voting systems. The AU Election Observation Mission is of the view that the voting system is a unique invention and all efforts should be made to maintain and improve it. Under electoral administration and preparation, the IEC is established under Section 42 of the 1997 Constitution as amended as an independent constitutional body responsible for organizing the elections. The budget of the IEC is provided by the state upon approval by the National Assembly. It may also receive grants, donations, and fees from groups other than political parties. It is also expected to submit an audited statement of accounts to the National Assembly at the end of each financial year. The mission noted that the IEC does not have a legal department and has to hire private attorneys in situations where cases are filed against it in court. This is reactive and not proactive on matters of law which could be addressed by in-house legal advisors. On voter registration and voters' role, the registration of voters is provided for under Articles 39 and 43 of the Constitution of 1997 and Section 12 of the Elections Act of 2009. Voter registration requirements are that you be a citizen of the Gambia, have attained or will attain the age of 18 years at the time of the election, produce an identification document, birth certificate, a Gambian passport, a national identity card, or an attestation certified by a district chief or village alcalde. Registration is constituency-based, meaning that a person should register in a constituency where they reside or were born. The voter registration was initially scheduled to take place on 14th January to 26 February as per the elections calendar. However, logistical challenges relating to the procurement of materials and equipment for the registration delayed the process. The IEC carried out a voter registration drive from 29th May to 11th July 2021, which concluded with 987,824 voters registered. After verification and post-matching, the final list of registered voters was reduced to 962,157, representing approximately 96.2% of the projected 1 million eligible voters. Of the total registered voters, 545,318, which represents 57%, are females, and 416,839, which represents 43%, are males. Political party registration and nomination of candidates. Article 60 of the 1997 Constitution provides for the IEC to register or deregister political parties. There are currently 18 registered political parties in the Gambia, representing a 100% increase from the 2016 registration, where only 9 political parties were registered. The mission notes that only 5 of the registered parties, plus an independent, contested this election. Article 46 of the 1997 Constitution provides that an election for the office of the President should be conducted 3 months before the expiration of the term of the sitting President. It further provides for the IEC to determine the date for the nomination of candidates and for holding the election. Nominations for the 2021 election took place from 30 October to 5 November 2021. In line with the 2017 Elections Amendment Act, candidates had to pay a deposit of 10,000 Gambian dollars. The mission notes that this amount is much lower than the 500,000 Gambian dollars paid by aspiring candidates in the 2016 election. The mission noted that all 6 candidates signed the Code of Conduct, pledging commitment to a peaceful election. The mission commends the IEC for initiating the peace pledge for candidates and reinforcing the Code of Conduct. Under campaigns and campaign finance, the official campaigns started on 7 November and ended on 2nd December 2021 at midnight in compliance with the law. The mission observed that the campaigns took place in a peaceful environment. Campaign messages focused on peace and security, infrastructural development, education, health, youth development, vocational training, women empowerment, entrepreneurship support, and economic stability. The police were equally proactive in monitoring the observance of approved campaign schedules to ensure no political party violated the schedule. The mission received consents from various stakeholders regarding private funding of political parties, which can compromise the playing field. The media. The Independent Electoral Commission has the mandate to ensure that each candidate has equal access to the public media, including radio and television. The mission observed that the Gambia enjoys an improved, vibrant, and diverse media, which allows for free expression of opinions, with 6 active newspapers and over 50 radio stations and 8 television stations. The mission noted that the Information Bill was signed into law on 25 August 2021. The Access to Information Act allows members of the public to obtain information from public institutions and ensure transparency and accountability, and an opportunity for the citizens to participate in the governance of the country. The mission observed that media houses such as Star TV, GRTS, and Paradise TV covered election-related programs, campaigns, and political adverts. The GRTS also provided a 25 minutes per day platform to all political parties and candidates to publicize their policies in 2 languages. The mission received concerns about hate speech and misinformation circulating through the media, particularly social media platforms. On participation of women, the Gambia, in the Gambia, women represent more than half of the population, that's 50.5%, and comprise 57% of all voters. The mission noted that although there is a demographic advantage for women in the Gambia, this does not translate to their nomination in leadership positions. Of the 6 presidential candidates, none was a woman. Mary Sok, an independent presidential aspirant, became the first Gambian woman to file a nomination for the presidency, although her application did not meet the required criteria for nomination. On election day findings, the voting process was peaceful, with polling staff and voters showing commitment and a sense of professionalism. Party agents were present in some polling centers visited, while the presence of citizen observers was not consistent. International observers were also present. Party agents and observers were given access to the polling stations without any restrictions. Significant participation of women as polling staff was observed. There was no consistent compliance with COVID-19 prevention measures. The mission deployed 70 observers in 15 constituencies across the country. They visited a total of 298 polling stations on election day to observe the opening, voting, closing, and counting procedures in their areas of deployment, with 55% in urban and 45% in rural areas. Overall, the atmosphere throughout election day remained peaceful. Opening of polling. The mission observed opening procedures at 24 polling stations across 19 constituencies. The mission notes that 87% of polling stations visited opened on time at 8 sharp. The polling staff followed the required opening procedures and guidelines. The mission noted that the security officers were present at polling stations and acted professionally. The mission observed that there were well-controlled queues outside all the polling stations visited before and during opening process. Election materials. The mission noted that materials were delivered in advance in most polling stations visited and were insufficient quantities. Polling stations. The mission notes that most polling stations were easily accessible to the voters. The layout of the polling stations promoted easy flow of voters. In some polling stations, voters were divided into streams in a manner that protected the secrecy of the ballot and allowed also for easy flow. Election personnel. The polling staff were generally competent in carrying out their duties and demonstrated a sense of commitment. The mission commends the Independent Electoral Commission and candidates for deploying women and youth as polling officials and party candidates agents. Observers and party candidate agents. The mission noted the presence of other international observer missions at some polling stations visited. The mission also noted the presence of citizen observers in most stations visited. The participation of citizen observers was crucial to enhance the credibility and transparency of the electoral process. The mission notes that party and candidate agents were present at most of the polling stations visited and could carry out their mandate without hindrances and with a high degree of tolerance. Voting procedures. The mission noted that voting proceeded uninterrupted in most polling stations visited throughout the day. Where there was an interruption, it was for less than 10 minutes. The reason for the interruption was usually because the bell was not heard, prompting verification by the polling staff accompanied by party or candidate agents and the voter. The secrecy of the vote was guaranteed in all polling stations visited. The mission noted that priority and assistance were extended to persons with disability, the elderly, pregnant women and nursing mothers, as well as other persons with special needs. Closing the polls, most stations observed closing at 17 hours. All voters in the queue at closing time were allowed to cast their vote. The mission also noted that ballot reconciliation was done at the polling station at the end of polling. Counting of votes. Counting took place at the polling stations where the results were published. The counting process took place in a peaceful atmosphere at all polling stations visited by the mission. All the necessary documentation was completed and results were posted at the polling station after candidate agents were provided with a copy of the results form. The mission noted the presence of both citizen and international observers during closing of the election day operations. And conclusion, the mission commends the government and the people of the Gambia, the Independent Electoral Commission, political parties, candidates, and their supporters for their peaceful conduct before and during polling. The mission is hopeful that the peaceful character of the 2021 presidential election will consolidate this tradition. The mission further encourages all stakeholders to sustain the prevailing peace in the remaining phase of the electoral process. Based on its pre-election assessment and election day findings, the mission concludes that the election was conducted in a peaceful and democratic political environment and conforms to national and international standards. And under recommendations, the mission offers the following preliminary recommendations for improvement of future electoral processes in the Gambia. 1. Efforts to be made to pass the electoral bill and continue constitutional reforms. 2. The government should enact laws that provide for public funding and enforce regulations governing private funding of political parties. 3. Political parties are encouraged to take more deliberate steps to adopt affirmative action measures aimed at increasing the participation of women, youth, and people living with disabilities in decision-making structures. 4. Introduce legal requirements such as mandatory quotas to enhance women and youth political participation. 5. The IEC to establish a legal department to attend to litigations and speedily. And lastly, as I conclude, the mission calls on all stakeholders to remain calm during and after the electoral process. The mission urges any stakeholders dissatisfied with the electoral process to seek redress through the established legal and institutional mechanisms. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Your Excellency,